Yep, you read the title. Today's story is actually a big one for the future of PC gaming. That's because, in my opinion, Windows 11 kind of blows, and at the very least, I want viable competition to it. I don't like Microsoft's advert and tracking stuffed, unusable nightmare that just has updates that break shit all the time. And what's been dangling in front of us for a while now is Linux, but more importantly, SteamOS, where their entire point is to get all the benefits of Linux, but with basically none of the power user requiring quirks. And it's on that front that we've just seen a humongous update because Valve are making moves to bring SteamOS beyond the Steam Deck. It is actually out on another device right now, and all of this is actually prompting a response from Microsoft. But that's not to say that the future is sure and easy. As an example, I'm sure loads of you know, you cannot play really big games like, say, I don't know, Call of Duty, Fortnite, GTA, basically anything that's got a real hardcore anti-cheat solution, including, say, Valorant. That's just because they're not supported on Linux, which is bad. It is something that we're going to have to overcome, but it will be worth overcoming. Taking a look at Microsoft right now, well, their consumer software is not exactly loved by people. In fact, if you want to get more security updates for Windows 10, soon you're going to have to pay for that. And Windows 11 has just not been a great, stable gaming experience. So competition is good. This whole situation is proof as to why, and that's why what Valve are doing is worth us knowing about and talking about. But it's also goddamn hilarious because, right, you may not know this, Gabe Newell worked at Microsoft before the founding of Valve, but the little detail that most people aren't aware of is that he actually worked on the earlier versions of the Windows operating system, including Windows 95. So I suppose for Gabe, he's sort of circling back around to take a stab at what he helped create. Now, this just wouldn't be a proper video if we weren't able to poke a little bit of fun at Phil Spencer, because, it's a little bit awkward for him. Just months after telling Polygon how he really would like his Lenovo Legion Go to feel a bit more like an Xbox, Lenovo have went and they've made the Legion Go feel like a Steam Deck. And that's because the Lenovo Legion Go S is actually now officially the first third-party device running native SteamOS. Native, right? So it's not just some Steam big picture mode thing. It is actually running proper SteamOS. And yes, it's just one device, but it does represent a major shift. This is Valve quietly reshaping the handheld market under everybody's noses, because what they did is they spent years perfecting their ecosystem with the Steam Deck, and now they're leveraging that to essentially become the default for handheld PC gaming, the standard. It is a masterclass in market positioning, and it's also a masterclass in product market fit. And that's because even though there are so many other devices out there that literally outperform the Steam Deck, right? They outperform it, they have better screens, they have literally, more power, more FPS, etc. For so many people, the Steam Deck OLED is still the default choice, the default recommendation. And my point is, you know that you have got a sticky OS whenever PC gamers are willing to forego performance and frames per second in order to get more usability. And it's with that fundamental truth established that Valve are going to make one of their largest chess moves yet. I say chess because compared to Valve, most of the competition are just playing checkers. Here's why in this case. So, the testing process required for the Lenovo Go S ended up yielding improvements that make SteamOS more viable for unofficial use on other handhelds. That essentially means that people are going to be able to do way more cool shit, and we're just going to see more neat projects. But it's also huge because through partnerships with AMD and Nvidia, Valve are greatly expanding what SteamOS plays nice with. That is massive, and that helps to open the way for SteamOS as a legitimate desktop alternative. And look, in a world where Windows updates can do whatever fun Copilot or recall thing, or perhaps break your games like with what recently happened with Assassin's Creed, it's actually pretty big to have an option. And beyond just the Legion Go, we've heard directly from a SteamOS developer, Pierre Liu. And it's quite funny, he's super humble, right? Because per him, they're not trying to compete with Windows. They don't have some sort of target for market share. They just want to build something cool. And if that happens to result in a viable desktop OS alternative, hey, it's a bonus. Nice, humble, but let's be real. Valve is also a business, and the more people using SteamOS, well, the more people using Steam, which is great for Valve. But there is a little bit of a fun angle too, because for Gabe Newell, it is a realization of his 2012 shredding of his former employer's software. The levels of irony in this are just delicious. So in 2012, right, Microsoft unveiled Windows 8. Windows 8 was shit. I mean, this is what it looked like. And when that happened, Gabe Newell declared Windows 8 to be a catastrophe. And then he promised to get Steam's then 2,500 games running on Linux in order to preserve the openness of PC gaming. Basically, he saw what Microsoft was doing and thought, oh shit, we cannot trust the future of PC gaming to you lot. And fast forwarding to 2025, they've not only reached that goal, they've way surpassed it with what they're doing in the deck. But it all comes from the ashes of a humongous failure, right? And this is a failure that was in response to just the shit show of those days about, 12, 13 years ago. TLDR, right? For Valve, console sales were really awesome in the 2000s. You had big hits like Left 4 Dead, you had the Orange Box, which is fairly legendary. PC gaming was also not in as healthy a place then as it is now, and Windows 8 was an absolute clusterfuck. This all led to Steam machines. These were basically Valve's attempt in 2013 to break free from Windows and to kind of have their own console ecosystem on the go. And this meant we got things like Big Picture Mode, Steam Link, and the curiously designed Steam controller. It was innovative, it just wasn't really what anyone was expecting. Now, this overall initiative was honestly a complete flop per the numbers. Nobody really talks about Steam machines these days, but all of the technology from that day basically has fed through straight to SteamOS and the deck. With the most important thing, of course, being Proton, which is the translation layer that basically allows for seamless Linux gaming. It is a true game changer, and this overall situation now is so good that Microsoft are actually feeling like they have to respond. Microsoft are responding, and they're responding to the Steam Deck, which has sold 3 million units, which honestly is relatively tiny. And when you take a look at the Steam hardware survey, it does make that clear. Arch Linux, which is what SteamOS is running on, is just 0.2% of the Steam user base. Windows is 96.10%, and Mac is 1.61%. Now, 3 million is still plenty of consoles, but compare that to anything else, and it's tiny. I mean, it's less than the Japan exclusive WonderSwan, which sold 3.5 million, and yes, there was a thing called a WonderSwan. Anyway, the point here is the product market fit that I mentioned earlier, and how Steam Deck is attracting early adopters and power users. Those are the people who tend to love something, be the trendsetters, and champion it. And of course, for Microsoft, there's bound to be the obvious embarrassment. I mean, just look at a Windows gaming handheld user experience compared to what a Steam Deck is. It is embarrassing. That is exactly why Phil Spencer wants his device to feel like an Xbox. But there's a problem with that. Windows 11 is just not built for that form factor, and actually kind of funny for this story, if any version of Windows was, I mean, it would kind of be closer to Windows 8. But anyway, today, if you're using Windows without a keyboard or a mouse, you're just going to have a bad time. I would know, I've got a ROG Ally, I love it, but if I'm not using Big Picture Mode, I'm unhappy. And that's where we talk about Microsoft's VP of Next Generation, Jason Ronald, because he is promising that we'll be getting a console-like level of simplicity for Windows handhelds as early as this year. Yes, as early as 2025, which presumably means some sort of Xbox console UI-like interface, I suppose is a layer on top of Windows, I guess. And look, to be fair to him, that could work, and his side does have quite a few legs up over Valve. I mean, if it's Windows, drivers just will be easier. Kernel-level anti-cheat solutions will not block major titles that, at least by concurrency numbers and playtime, dominate the industry. But there's a giant thing that's not in his favor, and it's the simple fact that they're Microsoft. I think if anything, Microsoft are known for kind of snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, so even if they've got bullish plans, here's at least some of why I'm a little skeptical and why I'm glad that Steam is there to actually give competition. This is going to help you reframe how you see the gaming business. So, money, right? Microsoft is a business, and you may be shocked to find out that money is what they care about. So, I mocked up this quick infographic. This is breaking down Microsoft's revenue by product line from their 2024 annual report. And hey, good news versus 2023, gaming is bigger than LinkedIn. Because in 2023, gaming and LinkedIn were basically the same size by revenue, which is honestly extremely depressing. Anyway, gaming is a little smaller than Windows, but even Windows is dwarfed by Microsoft's enterprise software segment, and if you compare that to, say, their cloud segment, well, it's also looking a little bit small. The point basically is, if you just look at those numbers, like, gaming is not that important for Microsoft. Now, it's not to say that gaming is not something they care about and want to be successful in. I mean, there was the rumor that basically Satya Nadella had a go, no-go decision on divest from Xbox, divest from gaming, or basically double down on it, double down in Game Pass, and buy Activision. At the very least, they wouldn't drop $69 billion if they didn't care about gaming. But given their gaming track record, they still have a lot to prove. Now, I talked about revenue there. Profit is an entirely different story, right? And sadly, we do not have direct per product area margins. Oh, that would be awesome. But what we do have is their three major segments of enterprise software, which has got a 52% margin, cloud, which is 47%, and personal computing, which is the bit that includes Xbox. It's only 31%. So what we can basically learn here is that gaming is small, right, compared to the other things that they do, and it's also less profitable than the rest of Microsoft. Now, for Valve, gaming is absolutely everything, right? It is their entire focus. For Microsoft, though, well, it's not their entire focus. And Microsoft's history of delivery in non-enterprise software and hardware is, at the very best, extremely mixed. That's not to say that Xbox doesn't want to do well. Obviously they do. There are people there. They want to do well. It's just to say that Valve has got complete focus. Xbox are part of a far larger company that has got other priorities. Though at the very least, Xbox does have a little bit more of an incentive to care, and that's because their 2025 and onward strategy is far more about software sales, as we covered in this video analysis. And that does mean that expanding their efforts to more and more devices, including handheld, is a good thing. What that means is more competition. I still do not trust their record on desktop software. Windows routinely makes me want to pull my own hair out. That's why I want SteamOS to actually rise. But sadly for SteamOS, we're kind of being blocked by a few things. Our dream scenario is essentially a return of Steam machines and then just us being able to use SteamOS on our new builds. We're not exactly there yet. So Valve are not back to making Steam machines. Pierre-Loup told us as much in that interview, but he actually did say that that is an open door for the future, which is kind of promising. But there is obviously the major roadblock of anti-cheat. So as an example, right, you cannot play Valorant, Fortnite, Apex, Siege, Destiny, Rust, Call of Duty, and so many other games on the deck. But of course you can on a ROG Ally running Windows. And that means that while this is unintentional on Microsoft's side, this is their moat. This is the thing that for whole segments of gamers, you know, gamers who play literally the most played and popular games that exist, well, they can't do that on a Steam Deck. And that is going to be the unintentional ace up Microsoft's sleeve. Now, this is something that Pierre-Loup talked about, right? He basically said that the thing with anti-cheat is it requires constant updating and maintenance from the developer side. So it's not something like the Proton compatibility layer where they can basically just make it and for the most part, it'll just work. And he also doesn't blame the developers because at the end of the day, most users are on Windows. Pierre-Loup says, look, devs are going to prioritize Windows. That's where the users are. And the best that Valve can do is to support devs where they can, which is a fair and reasonable statement, right? And he does point out that most anti-cheat limited games are the likes of shooters, which are not great in something like a Steam Deck, which is true, but also it does get to my pain point with this entire developing story. I think the best future is one where SteamOS expands beyond handheld, right? Where we're not just limited to Windows. And I mean, sure, you could say, well, look, if you really need to play a Windows game, right, for your easy anti-cheat, you can just dual boot. But if people need to dual boot to play their video games, well, then it's just going to be inherently niche. And that's the situation we're in. Pierre-Loup is right. Developers will prioritize the users, and that gives us a chicken and egg problem. How do we get developers to support Steam Deck, to support SteamOS with more games, with more anti-cheat solutions? Because if we want to be able to play the biggest games that we care about the most, we're going to need probably more than just Valve can do themselves. And to be completely transparent, that's why I made this damn video, right? There is a non-Microsoft dominated desktop gaming future. It is out there, but it is just out of reach. There are a few roadblocks, but with Valve actually getting SteamOS on the Lenovo Go S, and now there being a build of SteamOS that's going to be more broadly compatible with things, man, we're getting close. It is so promising. The potential for a vastly better user experience is there. And of course, for Valve, I did say that this is kind of them playing chess when everyone else is playing checkers. Because, well, if Valve does end up getting SteamOS to be a humongous player in the space, well, That's obviously going to be amazing for the adoption of Steam, which would suit them just fine. Now, if you've listened on this long, you're probably down for a little bit of Microsoft tea, which is why you should watch this video next.